The night carried a hush so deep it felt older than the land itself, a silence stitched from moonlight, snowfall, and the ghosts of forgotten trails. The wind crawled along the valley floor as though searching for something it once loved, tugging at the branches, sifting through ashes, urging the world to notice what was unraveling in the dark. Through that frozen quiet ran Ahiana Snowbird, age 20, her breath a thin ribbon of white unraveling behind her, as if part of her spirit were lifting out into the cold. The flames that consumed her cabin crackled like cruel laughter, chasing her through the trees with the memory of everything she had lost, and she kept running, barefoot, trembling, half-blind, wondering with each desperate heartbeat if the night would swallow her before mercy found her. The snow reached her knees, biting her skin with teeth of ice, yet she forced herself forward, refusing to look back at the burning shape collapsing behind her. She had survived, somehow, while those who raised her lay silent beneath the ruin, and shame pressed against her lungs until breathing felt like theft. Still, the land urged her onward with soft gusts of wind, like unseen hands guiding her, and she followed that fragile instinct toward a distant shape she could barely make out through the storm. It was a barn, tall, wooden, lantern-lit from within, standing alone against the white expanse like a lone sentinel waiting for a story it didn't yet know it belonged to. She stumbled toward it with a mixture of hope and dread, wondering if shelter or death waited inside, and that flicker of uncertainty tugged gently at her shaken heart. The barn door groaned under her trembling push, and warmth breathed over her face like the sigh of a tired guardian. Horses shifted in their stalls, snorting softly as if they sensed her sorrow, their bodies radiating a comfort she had not felt since childhood nights when her mother's songs hovered above her like a shield. She sank behind a stack of hay bales, curling into herself with the instinct of a creature wounded beyond logic, her heart pounding loud enough she feared it echoed off the beams. Every snap of wood, every rustle of straw made her flinch, every whisper of wind felt like footsteps, every shadow seemed shaped like the men who had destroyed everything. And as she clasped her hands over her ears, she wondered who owned this barn, and whether the footsteps she soon heard crunching through the snow outside belonged to salvation or one final cruelty. The door opened and lantern light spilled in like a breath of gold. A tall silhouette filled the frame, shoulders broad enough to block the wind, presence quiet enough to hush the horses. Dawson Hale, age 30, stepped inside with the careful movements of someone who had learned long ago that the world was easily frightened. His hat dripped melted snow onto the dirt floor, his boots thudding softly as he closed the door behind him, sealing the night out as though he knew someone small and trembling needed that barrier. He lifted the lantern, eyes scanning the stalls with a patient sort of awareness, not the quick, sharp suspicion of a hunter but the gentle, wary searching of a man who had once lost everything and feared causing harm again. Beneath the hay, Ahiana's breath hitched, and curiosity flickered within her panic. Why did this stranger's presence feel more like a question than a threat? Dawson paused near the center of the barn, lowering the lantern to the height of a whisper. "I know you're here," he murmured, his voice warm and low, carrying the softness of someone accustomed to talking to frightened horses. He did not reach for a weapon. He did not bark demands. Instead, he set the lantern on a barrel and slowly knelt, as though making himself smaller so she wouldn't feel cornered. The snowfall outside tapped gently against the roof, a steady rhythm keeping time with her racing heartbeat. "You're cold," he added quietly, "and hurt. Whoever you are, you're safe in here." His words moved through her like a fragile thread tying her to something she hadn't felt since before the world caught fire, safety, and she held her breath as she weighed whether this giant cowboy was a danger or a refuge she had never dared hope for. When she finally rose from behind the hay, stepping into the glow, Dawson inhaled sharply, for she looked like a spirit carved from winter, long hair clinging to her face, torn dress clutched around her shoulders, eyes burning with the remnants of a world gone to ash. Without hesitation, he shrugged off his heavy coat and draped it around her, the gesture slow enough to give her time to retreat if she wished. But the warmth of the wool sank through her skin and into the ache within her bones, and her knees nearly buckled with the relief of simple human kindness. Dawson steadied her with hands gentle enough to undo a lifetime of fear in a single moment. The lantern flame flickered between them, painting their breath in soft gold, and she looked up at him through lashes wet with cold, wondering why his expression held recognition, as if he saw not just her suffering but the years that shaped her. He brought her into the cabin with steps measured and protective, adjusting his stride so she could lean on him without losing balance. Snowflakes clung to her hair like tiny prayers. Each breath she took smelled of wood smoke and the faint trace of leather from his coat. She felt foolishly aware of the warmth radiating from him, and he seemed equally aware of her silence, though he never pushed her to speak. Inside the cabin, he stoked the fire, filled a basin with warm water, and tended her wounds with hands that shook only when he thought she wasn't looking. She watched the way his jaw flexed, the way grief seemed stitched into the corners of his eyes, and a curious ache pressed against her ribs. Why did this cowboy look at her with the sorrow of someone who recognized the ruins inside her? When she finally managed words, they were fragile, shaped from the smoke of memory. She told him of the bandits, of the fire, of waking to screams that did not stop even after the flames died. Her voice broke as she confessed she ran, that she lived when the ones she loved did not. Dawson listened without interruption, his stillness a shelter stronger than any wall. When she lowered her gaze in shame, he knelt before her, lifting her chin with the softest touch. "Survival isn't abandonment," he whispered. "It's courage." For a moment she almost believed him, and something inside her loosened, like a knot pulled by steady hands. Morning came quiet and silver. Ahiana woke beneath a thick quilt, her body warm for the first time since the fire. Through the frosted window she saw Dawson in the yard feeding horses, his movements steady, reverent, shaped by grief and resilience. She studied the lone curve of his shoulders, thinking of the widowhood she glimpsed in his eyes the night before, and a tender curiosity rose within her. Why did the world take so much from people who only ever wanted to care for something gentle? He returned with breakfast, placed a plate before her, and when their fingertips touched over the tin cup, the warmth that sparked between them stole her breath in a way danger never had. Days settled around them like soft blankets layered one atop the other. Dawson taught her how to brace fence rails and feed the horses. Ahiana showed him how to read subtle shifts in the wind and understand the quiet messages of the land. Their connection grew through small gestures. The way he draped an extra blanket by her chair without mentioning it, the way she left woven feathers on his hat brim when she thought he wouldn't notice. Rumors reached town that the giant cowboy had taken in a young Apache woman, and whispers carried judgment. Dawson ignored them. Ahiana pretended they didn't sting. But when she saw snow begin to fall one evening, her entire body coiled with fear, and Dawson stepped closer without a word, his shadow shielding her panic as though instinct alone guided him. She wondered then if their fates had already tangled long before they met. When the sheriff arrived with news that the bandits had been spotted near the ranch, Ahiana's breath froze. The room spun with memories of fire and screams, and she reached for the wall to steady herself. Dawson immediately placed himself between her and the door, hands tense, jaw set, heart pounding visibly at his throat. A strange fear filled his eyes, not fear for himself, but fear of losing her. "You won't run again," he said, voice shaking with a truth he hadn't realized until now. "Not while I'm here." Before she could answer, hoofbeats thundered outside, closer than mere coincidence, leaving the air thick with dread. Night fell with the weight of a warning. Snow blanketed the ranch in a cold hush as the bandits approached, darkness shifting like wolves circling prey. Dawson stepped outside alone, shoulders squared, breath rising in determined clouds. He did not shout or threaten. Instead, he stood unyielding, a wall carved from loss and rising protectiveness. His voice, low and steady, warned them to leave and never return. Ahiana watched from the window, tears burning trails down her cheeks, her fingers gripping the windowsill hard enough to leave marks. The land seemed to hold its breath as the standoff stretched thin as rawhide. When the sheriff's lantern appeared in the distance, the bandits fled into the night, swallowed by the storm. Ahiana ran to Dawson as soon as the danger broke, her feet carrying her to him as though she had always belonged there. "Why did you risk your life for me?" she whispered, voice trembling. Dawson's silence was answer enough, for every emotion he held was already written in his eyes. Days later, Dawson guided her gently into town, asking Pastor Whitlock and Elder Ramona to join them beneath the pines that bordered the church. He said Ahiana deserved a ceremony of respect, a union marked by dignity rather than secrecy or pity. She wore a dress Ramona helped stitch, adorned with white beading and soft brown feathers woven into her long dark hair. Dawson stood across from her, hands trembling, eyes soft with something he no longer tried to hide. Their vows were quiet, shaped not from grand promises but from the shared understanding of two wounded souls choosing each other without force or fear. When he slipped the ring onto her finger, snow drifted between them like confetti from the sky itself. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, whispering, "You're home now," and she felt the warmth of those words settle into every place inside her that had once only known winter. Long after the guests faded and the snow settled, Ahiana rested her head against Dawson's chest, listening to the slow, peaceful rhythm of a heart that had once broken but learned how to beat again. The land around them glowed in the pale hush of evening, the sky soft as a faded memory. In that quiet, the world felt less like a place that stole and more like a place that sometimes returned what mattered. Perhaps every soul wandered through storms searching for the doorway that had been waiting for them all along. And perhaps tonight, somewhere out in the cold, a warm light flickered for another lost traveler, ready to guide them home, just as this one had guided her.